Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the 4 o'clock Douglas County Board of County Commissioners work session for July 30th, 2025. Today, we are discussing the Consolidated Fire District 1 budget request. Like all of our work sessions, it is for informational purposes only. We don't make any decisions at our work sessions. We also don't take public comment on our work sessions. If you'd like to provide public comment on this item, you're welcome to join us at our 5:30 business meeting and provide comments during the public comment portion of our agenda. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sean Peterson, who I believe is working through the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen sharing here. All right, we're up and running. This evening, we're going to go through Consolidated Fire District's 2026 budget. As we kind of kick this off, I do want to just point out, two requests that you see in your packet. One is going to be the 2026 budget. That is going to be reflective of the budget that you initially saw at the beginning of the budget discussions. In the blue bracket, you'll read that the recommended budget is reflected in 2026 admin. And that's just based off of the commission's feedback reflecting that $500,000 increase. So I want to point those out as we kind of talk about this, that there's kind of two distinct budgets, but there is a significant overlap. I'll say it that way. Just to kind of acclimate us a little bit, Consolidated Fire District is a pretty vast district, covering about 288 square miles in total. You'll see it etched out here in sort of the orange color, generally surrounding the city of Lawrence and the city of Eudora, and then also covers the city of Lecompton. So again, just kind of spatially, this is the district that we're talking about. Just zooming in, and hopefully this is not as grainy as on my computer, but two stations in particular as we get into it. One is the location down in the bottom right, which is station 111. And then 151 is the station which is located in Lecompton. As we kind of get into this, I do want to just point out the difference between the mill levy. So the 5.5 mills you can see is going to generate about $1.7 million in 2026 dollars. Moving up to that 6 mil actually increases the total amount by about $158,000. Just for the sake of transparency, that millage actually amounts to about $1.44 a month on a typical home at $300,000 in this area, totaling about $17.25. I have an asterisk on there just because there is a little bit of deviation based on jurisdictions that are also part of that mill levy, or that total mill levy, I should say. So the expenditures, I'll just kind of go through this briefly. I'm going to skip over personnel and just kind of go through contractual items that are part of the budget. So within this line item, there's about 25, and this is part of the overview sheet that you had in your packet and is available online as well. But about $25,000 has been put towards, or is being recommended to be put towards facilities as well as concrete at the 111 station to replace the apron. We have about $18,000 to help fund fire hose and ladder testing, and then also implement some annual staff health screenings. And then also this is reflective of about $7,500 decrease in a lease payment for a station that unfortunately we had to terminate due to some conditions. So that I just point that out, that station is still somewhat under review, but you do see that decrease in the lease amount. Commodities is up about $5,000 in total, with about $12,000 going towards NFPA compliant gear, or bunker gears is what we call that. Capital outlay, there's a decrease of roughly $48,000. This is reflective of a lot of work that CFD is doing to integrate their system with the Douglas County overall systems as far as IT and emergency communications. So a big, I think, thing to focus in on for 2026. You'll also see a reduction of $75,000 from motor vehicles or that line item. That funding is just being shifted over into the reserve. So that helps to purchase larger capital items, but that's, again, it's zeroed out, but it's sort of shifting within the budget. And again, another example of some facility upgrades, but we've put in about $10,000 to help with those upgrades. And then we have the miscellaneous expenditures there. That's actually decreasing, and a lot of that is due to a lease purchase payment that is come due, or rather is complete rather. So that's going from about 120,000 to 40,000 due to those outstanding obligations. And then, please.
Thank you. Commissioners, I think it's very important to note here on that miscellaneous expenditures line that this includes our cash forward into the future year. So you'll see in the budget that cash basis carry forward line. That is the sum of that lease payment that Sean was talking about, plus that carry forward into 2027. And Sean, I'm sorry if you were going to mention that later part.
I appreciate it, Brooke. Thank you. And then lastly, transfers. Last year, or rather this year, 2025, there was about $150,000 allocated into transfers for equipment reserve. So this is actually being bolstered a little bit again based off some of the changes in the other lines to go to about $300,000. And this again supports the long-term replacement of fire apparatus and other capital equipment. I'll pause here for a moment if there's any questions on any of those changes. I know Chief Mathis is here as well to explain. Please.
Yeah, I had a question. Where do you get your fuel for your trucks?
County.
We fuel at the county shops.
Do they bill you?
Yes, sir. It's a pass through. Along with
Thanks.
the maintenance costs from.
Any other questions? Carry on.
So we just wanted to include a little bit of a visual reference just to help kind of the breakout. So this again is covered. Major portion of it is 46% is being assigned to personnel, and you can see the other breakouts of the items. So moving into the personnel again, this is the line that you're seeing the bigger shift as a result of the $500,000 change, which you'll see right now. Again, this is just sort of the structure that we have in place currently, and this hierarchy is reflective of just paid staff. I do want to point out that we continue to have support from part-time EMS and firefighters, volunteer officers, and firefighters to supplement. But again, I just wanted to help sort of illustrate again, the two stations with 111 in South Lawrence and then 151 in Lecompton are our two staffed stations. Historically, Lecompton has been staffed from an 8 to 5 timeframe. So we are currently in the process of moving that firefighter to be more in line with the shifts that you see at 111. And then kind of jumping ahead to the idea with staffing with the $500,000 increase. So you'll see just the addition of the two shifts there, shift Y and shift Z, would just, again, complement the idea of 111 where we have one full-time firefighter available 24/7. And then again, continue to be supported in our response with part-time firefighters, EMS, volunteer officers, and firefighters. Skipping ahead, I think it's just important to kind of bring us back to the technical review that was done a couple of weeks ago, or rather was presented a couple of weeks ago. This is generally the staffing plan for full-time staffing that was proposed. So Within this, again, you'll see the structure is generally the same that we're looking towards with the $500,000 increase, but you'll see an additional FTE in each one of those shifts. So instead of having one firefighter responding on an engine, you would look to have two as well as a battalion chief. So there's actually 3 battalion chiefs that are recommended. One would be assigned at each station. And then you kind of have a fly person, so to speak, for the other, for the different shifts. And then I think it's valuable. Sorry, please.
Sorry, can we go back to that model? So that's how far in the future? This is something that was kind of recommended in the report, but this is nowhere near what we have had. So talk to me about what the thought process or expectation is to implement something like this.
Sure. Again, I think that this is entirely incumbent upon the ability to pay for these positions. So a lot of this would be based on future conversations and budget years in terms of what happens with the property values in this jurisdiction, if there's growth there. But as well as the idea if there is a desire to move the millage to support this in future years, that's certainly a discussion that we would look to you all to help guide this. I don't know if you want to say anything else to that, Chief, or.
And having talked with Sean and some of y'all, I know this is the time frame is very compressed on when y'all just got the information, and this is to get some critical staffing taken care of now. But all those, well, lack of better words, bullet points they provided was getting together a task force has multiple stakeholders in it from within the county to come up with a 5-year plan and prioritize what those needs are versus trying. Some of theirs were unrealistic, and trying to do them all would be unrealistic, and figuring out not just coming on, my thoughts, but really getting enough people to look at it and determine where the priorities are. And just even in apparatus, we have different viewpoints than what they proposed on timeframes, but give some time. The staffing's critical. And then we have time to start looking at the longer term and being able to report to y'all back over a year or more, looking at, probably assuming a 5-year plan, but being able to get y'all information that comes out as opposed to 3 weeks ago.
Sean, can you go back one slide? So this is what you're proposing with the $500,000 increase.
Correct.
Right. So you have shift officers versus battalion chiefs. Can you explain how those are different?
Sure. And I can probably let the chief do that.
Trying to think through, just battalion chiefs would run the shift, and there's going to be some overlap in terminology, but it's just as we grow, there's going to be more to manage, and maybe they'll hand more responsibility up. But you're going to need to go up the chain to battalion chiefs that will run the whole. They'll be back up and go and support the command role, as opposed to right now. They are the person that's on shift today fills an officer role, and he makes a lot of decisions on his own, but it's more as a company officer. And I can expand on that, but he's a working officer, as opposed to running at a higher level and managing more people and having more span of control and administrative responsibilities.
But from what I understand, I want to make sure I understand, that move from shift officer to battalion chief is sort of through a 5-year plan that we're thinking of. That's down the road. That's not even where we are yet. Okay.
Oh, by no means.
And I think, again, this slide that you see currently is just reflective of what we're talking about for 2026. Moving to this sort of broader, more robust staffing plan is reflective of, as the chief was saying, the administrative duties, but also the firefighting that needs to happen and the first response that needs to happen for these individuals. I think it's a good segue to kind of look at this sort of next steps over the next 12 to 18 months. And what you'll see is, as we've kind of phrased this, is just the foundational improvements. So the staffing stabilization, I think, is anybody within CFD, I think, will agree, is the most critical need that they have. So this hiring of two 24-hour firefighters at Station 111 gets the pressure sort of off and the ability to respond in a quick manner addressed. We also, I did want to point out, we have carried an assistant chief position this budget cycle. That is a position that I think is critical to some of the administrative tasks that you see here, both in 2, 3, and 4. But I say all this to say there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. Back to the question about, how long are we looking here? This is really a snapshot in time as far as, again, 18 months is aggressive for these things, I will say, but a lot of, I guess the way I'll put it is a lot of technical changes that will allow us to kind of move forward and adapt this department to provide for the needs of our community. And with that, that is sort of the visual presentation. I'm happy to bounce back onto any slides if there's anything else, and we're happy to stand for any questions.
So Sean, you talked about the half mil increase and the impact that would have on homes for their tax burden. But the same taxpayers within CFD 1 would also be on the county tax rolls, and we're looking at a decrease of 0.6 mils for them. So that's, can you talk to me about the impact that would have?
Yeah, as the commission considers sort of the overall general budget for the county, it is reflective, as you mentioned, a reduction of millage. I believe it is 0.6 is the total amount that you're considering. What is being considered within the area of CFD with this change would be half a mil. So overall, you're still going to be seeing a net loss, if you will, decrease. There you are. In the millage for the CFD district. And that again is that general kind of area that I showed on the map surrounding, again, the city of Lawrence and involving the city of Lecompton.
Other questions, commissioners?
So we have kind of two budgets that have been presented. We had the one that was in our packet originally for the 5.5 mils. We have this one for the 6 mils. And I think that the 6 mil budget reflects a drop in the bucket towards needs that we know CFD will have. I don't know where that 5-year plan will lead in terms of like what it would take to pay for that. And that's part of that task force, is to, help us kind of dial in on balancing that between what taxpayers are interested in paying for fire coverage and what gets not only good fire coverage, but better safety for our personnel. So this is one step, and I recognize that we haven't had, all this information in front of us for as long as we normally do for budget cycles. But I think we can. I think it's clear that the need is greater than the 6 mils at the moment, and I think this gives us some time to talk through what that would be and have good community conversations about what that impact would be like for folks and what they are interested in.
Can you talk a little bit about how you coordinate or discuss these plans with the Eudora Fire Department?
I have not talked with Eudora City Fire Department much because they've been struggling with their own staffing issues. We definitely talk when the chiefs are going to be out of town, because we fill the role of battalion chief or an extra set of hands, like yesterday running a brush truck. But we coordinate, one, just having chief support to come in for upper level incident management. But we've also worked on mutual aid going into Eudora when they've had to respond when they have responded up into their own calls, or mutual aid up into Leavenworth County and vice versa. If we've been drawn out west, we will request mutual aid for them. But again, they're having some severe struggles. And I know at times over Christmas, before they got their chief spot filled, they had zero coverage some days, and we were going to backfill them.
I think I'll just mention that's part of this timeline as we look out to this 12 to 18 month conversation. Is we look forward to having conversations with other stakeholders, including the other fire departments in the county, about how we can work together to sort of streamline this service with respect to just sort of overlap and mutual aid and automatic aid and how we communicate and dispatch. Again, we are in we are in one county, so it behooves us to work and cooperate with one another.
And Mr. Dorsey, if I can tag on to something that Eudora is going to, we are in effect at CFD a one call department. Not completely, but we are very brittle and go to status 0 quickly. We have run some numbers on overlaps of calls, and I have them handy. But even then, we're stretched thin. It's still, again, one person typically responding in a truck, which with unknown when their support will get there. Looking at just general response times from station 151 west of Lecompton runs 5 to 6 minutes. Just because gravel roads don't add much in that. It's 25 minutes plus from station 111 to those same areas, and vice versa.
When you mentioned the status 0 for CFD, that's based on personnel, not vehicles, because that's what we hear from all these
yes,
CFD
we work
police
in
not having enough vehicles, but it's a very different situation for CFD, right?
Right. We work in people, and it's difficult for us to track and get GIS data for that because Lawrence's are set numbers. Medic units 2, engines currently 4, and those numbers, the ERS for effectiveness versus first on scene, that's universal through NFPA standards and just research on what's required on fire ground. It doesn't matter if it's in Stull or across the street here. Those numbers we're trying to get to on fire grounds and medicals don't change.
Going back to what we currently have in terms of the staffing level, and that station 151 in Lecompton is at a 40-hour week position. The model, even under the 6 mills, talks about adding the 24 hours, but it's also shifting a 40-hour to a 24-hour, a 40-hour week to 24/7 coverage. So how's that absorbed in the budget?
So that's actually something that we're working towards right now is just moving that position to have more coverage in that area. So we were able to sort of increase that coverage within our existing budget for CFD. But again, that doesn't really come to fruition as far as having 3 shifts unless we have the 2 other FTEs coming online to be assigned to the other 2.
And if I might add, the converting it, we had to do it just for the pay to maintain people in Lecompton. The 40 hours a week was not paying enough for, I've replaced it twice in the last year. By converting to the 3 shift model, there are less days of a month, but there are more hours per month. So it's going to an average of 56 hours a week that just doing the one. But again, that is 10 days of the 30, but it is more hours are there.
So I think what I'm hearing is that a mill levy increase is needed to increase capacity. So if you could talk a little bit more around if a mill levy increase were to not be approved, what sort of risks would we see across your entire spread, the geography that you cover related to those that you serve, but also talk a little bit around the actual firefighters, EMS, and your volunteer firefighters, their health and well-being when it comes to their constraints and the fact that when it comes to their constraints, if the mill levy were not to be approved.
I'll address the district first. There's a radio tower that has relatively frequent false alarms in their smoke detector. It's about 3 miles west of Lecompton. It's about 28 minutes to get there. And our high frequency, low intensity calls don't attract a lot of response from people not going to leave dinner and all that. So when we send the person from station 111 up there, it's a 30-minute drive. It's taking them all the way to that corner of the county, and unknown what's going to be able to respond the rest of the way. Where 111 works well is it splits the difference. It's not all the way against one county border, and there's still some long drive times down into your district, sir, but it makes it closer. But again, we send somebody all the way up there. Even just training, you have one person that might have some people in the station. It's hard to schedule anything. And we have 2 people right now because of the shifting, or as we're getting that one, we've done that one position, they will come together and train in the afternoons, and they can do 2 things and actually work as a company. And their morale's just better. And I don't know how to explain that, but I worked a shift when it was Wakarusa 30 years ago. And just the being there by yourself is an emotional toll. It's a stress. And you're by yourself, not just in the building, but on anything you go on, you're most likely. So adding people allows us to come together and train. Eventually, as things progress, they can train on their own or as multiple companies. Just a psychological stress of much similar to a deputy. And then again, able to, even if it's still just one person, going to a lift assist, and you might have some, or something on one side of the county, it doesn't clear out the whole county, and it doesn't increase those response times.
I think I'll just maybe just say it this way, that it is 100% safety. It's also, as the chief's alluding to, the continuity in the operations. Again, the training that you have by just having one person that you're familiar with, and the ability to pull hose and those types of things, that is something that you train for. And if I can, I don't know if I want to say this, but if I want to quote, George Jones, we have a little bit of who's going to fill their shoes as well in some of this respect. So again, I think this is I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Absolutely.
I had a question. How long does it take to find, train, and hire a new staff member?
That's a critical question we're facing. I've talked with Commissioner Willie somewhat. Even as we increase staffing, it's not an entry-level job. You're making fireground decisions that require experience. We ran a recruit class of brand new people with zero certifications. We onboarded in February, and it will take close to a year to get them fully certified in EMS at best, and firefighting because of some outside issues that aren't EMS certifications not offered in this county, and firefighter 1 currently hasn't been offered in a while, though Chief Hornberger and I and some others are working on that. But those are some external certifications that are required. But just getting the familiarity of a new firefighter, this takes 9 months to a year for basically entry level. We just started this last week, accelerated program we had a pool of applicants that we kept on file. Thank you, Alex. people that already had some certifications because we are critical on EMS certifications. I know Commissioner Willie's experienced that journey. But EMS certifications, some have fire certifications, some have both, and trying to do accelerated program within 3 to 4 months, and then getting them in the station. Again, because it's not going into our current full-time employees, needs experience and some time to understand how we work, some time to build. We're not going to fires every day. We're not New York City, but nonetheless, get some time on to maybe understand the internal and external dynamics. It's not an entry-level job. And again, brand new, at least a year, inside 4 months. And then once they're even onboarded, as we have with Josh Cavisto, it's still, we're looking at 3 to 4 months of just getting him familiar with our system because he comes from the outside.
So if we approve the additional mill levy and the additional personnel in, let's say, August or September, you're really almost talking about the end of the year in 2026 before somebody is functional?
Yes, sir.
So some of your current staff are also full-time firefighters elsewhere.
Yes, we have. I don't know the numbers anymore. I know we have one with Casey Moe, several with Lawrence, one with Topeka, I believe. They bring various amounts of time as their lives evolve. And frankly, for the Lawrence ones, as their call volume skyrockets, some of them provide, niche spots of relief, association, filling all the roles an organization needs, but they may not be responding all that often. But
I know this isn't the 2026 conversation, but this future plan of having 2 people at a time on shift at each of these stations. Talk to me about the difference in onboarding someone for a full-time staff position when they are paired with someone versus when they're working alone.
wow, sorry, it's so exponentially better in that we can take newer people, theoretically even green, but into that position, and they're getting trained and working. Sorry, I'm getting at a loss for words, but having replacement plan and built in and on-the-job training versus if somebody leaves, as it's happened for decades now, is finding somebody that fits that role, that can perform it, that has not been doing it at all and is not living it every day. The ability to have replacement plan is the only thing that works on, but to my brain, but you're training your replacements. And we can't do that now very easily. Not when, well, full-time places do an academy but you're paid for an 80-hour academy. We are stretching them 1 or 2 times a week for 4 hours at a time to try and accomplish that.
So the onboarding time that you were talking to Commissioner Dorsey about, of a year or something, you're taking someone who may or may not have some certifications and trying to get them able to function on their own as a single person response. That's the model we're looking at here, but down the road, looking at being able to take someone on, whether they had fresh green or had a few certifications, and pairing them with someone like that exponential growth of that firefighter. So it would shorten that time from theoretically a year to considerably less, right?
Very much so.
So one of the things that concerned me about the original budget proposal, the 5.5 mils, was that the staffing need was still the most critically identified as the most critical part. But the only way to cover that was then to pull money out of what we'd been putting aside as an equipment reserve, knowing that we have significant equipment replacements coming in the future, and none of them cheap. And it's kind of been our practice as a county not to use one-time money for positions, which are ongoing needs. And that's what was being proposed with the 5.5 mils. And that's why this 6 mil, the half mil increase gets us out of that scenario. And I think gets us on track where we can talk about what the future needs might be.
Exactly. It keeps us from stopping the leak. It keeps us from a shell game of shuffling money around and sacrificing until we can get, again, a task force together or whatever we call it, and getting that plan and looking at what we're prioritizing and what needs to be the priorities, as opposed buys us a little time without sacrificing at the moment, and helps build that capital to make better decisions about as it comes into the next year.
Good questions, commissioners. Any others? Sarah? Commissioner Reed has a question.
I would just say before we close, I think so if there's more questions, obviously we've got time for that. But commissioners, we need direction in terms of which budget you want us to propose, to put forward and publish to the community and have a hearing on August 27th. So I think that is direction that the commission, that the staff is looking for. And if you don't feel like you can give us that direction today, I need that direction next week because we have to publish by August 11th.
That's where I was headed. I don't have any questions. Appreciate, excuse me, appreciate all my fellow commissioners' questions and the discussion that helped generate. And I just wanted to provide some comments that I do think, while this is a relatively small infusion of additional cash, all things considered, it's clear and evident to me that it will be put to very good and meaningful use right away. That's just very evident to me. And I mean, frankly, I'm inclined to wonder what else is possible, but I also appreciate, all the factors involved, and in particular, sort of that compressed timeline that we've talked about with the recent study, your department's ability to fully digest, discuss, process how to sort of map that out. And we've done some outlining of some phases for that 12 to 18 months. But I think that given that compressed timeline, that a small mill increase right now does make sense to me. It's a small baby step and an opportunity to infuse some additional personnel, which you have known previous to that study was a fundamental need, right? And there's just been previous constraints that make that not allowable. So this is a way for us as a county to allow for some infusion into the most critical part of the service, see how that additional staffing allows for some capacity building, some acceleration of training in a meaningful way. I think that there's some real positive things that I fully expect will be possible with that $500,000 increase. And then my hope is that by, if a majority of the commission is, wants to move forward with that increase, that by next spring, in preparation for the 2027 budget, we will have probably had more conversations by then anyway with you all, but you all will have a better sense of what to sort of recommend as a next stage of increased, investment for the county commission to consider in a way that allows you to meaningfully make good on some of the progress that you've needed to, that you've been able to outline, what other additional personnel sort of is the next critical staffing piece. So my hope is that this gives you a little bit of space to figure that out and see at least some months in action before our next budget session or season this time next year, some months in action with additional staff, the ability to see how that capacity helps you and figure out how to leverage that or sort of multiply it further. So those are my thoughts. So I appreciate all the presentation and being able to come back with some increased detail about what that $500,000 would look like after Commissioner Willie, brought that to the commission's attention. So I'm fully supportive of that. I think it's a baby step, but it's an important one.
You may not have this information, but it seems like a 0.5 mil increase doesn't generate a whole lot of dollar. I mean, we're used to very small numbers. Do we know how many properties that number include? And if we don't, it just occurred to me, like, I think that's one thing that I'm interested in hearing through the, you know, the longer process is sort of, I think, Chief, you talked about the last time, like, we're just struggling to get volunteers, and the way that we've provided fire service in the past, maybe changing here a little bit. And I think it's important to have a community conversation about the need for service, the expectations for service and what that service costs. Because if it's volunteer, it has a certain cost. And if we're doing more hiring of staff, it's going to be a different cost. And so we don't need answers there, but I think it's something that I look forward to that discussion. I agree with my colleagues that this seems to be, I don't want to take, I mean, the big thing for me is I don't want to take ongoing costs out of our fund balance for staffing holes that we have. And what I heard you say was, you know, we're having a hard time hiring based on the positions that we are. So that means we're at a dangerously low level of coverage if we can't even fill those spots. So we have to look about hiring differently. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. I want to be clear. We were not taking staff positions out of fund balance.
Right. We're avoiding by adding.
And we weren't even going to do that.
We weren't even going to do that.
We were going to reduce the amount of transfer, which is an ongoing expense. So that's what we were going to do to pay for the positions. We were going to reduce the size of the transfer. You know how I feel about fund balance and what we spend money on. So I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
That was my misunderstanding then.
I sort of think that's fine. Yeah, I understand. Yes. So anyways, I don't know if you have that number, Brooke, or.
I don't have the parcel count. I'm sorry.
You
That's
have
fine.
the population is about 13,000 residents in total. So I'm not sure what the household number is, but we could certainly look into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just trying to make the point that fire service for 13,000 people over this mileage is a whole different game than what we're talking about for LDCFM. And so I think as our fire service in the unincorporated areas are evolving, we need to keep that in mind, because it will be costly to do it in a different way.
Yes, sir. And to your question, in there, we've hit a couple of times where our terms, we do not have a very deep bench, and there's not many people qualified to do the job in our pool.
I'm sure this will be a conversation that the task force gets to take on, but I know Chief and I had talked about, like, if you've got one person on a shift, can you take someone who is learning and assign them a shift that is paid a small amount? I don't even know what that does for HR. Those are just conversations to have, like, how do we functionally get to that 2 people, even if we're not paying full staff up to that level? And then how do we use this budget year and this conversation around mill levy, which will probably get some attention within that region? How do we leverage that into the big need around volunteers? And I think that is a conversation that just needs to be elevated, and I think there are opportunities for that.
And if I can address that, and at the first meeting of Douglas County leadership, Lieutenant Quigley had said, "Hey, when I get settled in, can I work on recruiting up in the Northwest?" And I was like, "Yes, you saw this gap, and by all means." And we're going to have a discussion tomorrow as we start doing some exploratory planning on ideas he's already put out there.
I'll just reiterate that I am in favor of moving forward with everything that we've discussed already today. I think the health and well-being of your staff, but also just looking at the 13,000 that we're serving. I think it's really important that we look at how do we serve them? How do we serve them better? But at the same time, I understand, Commissioner Kelly, your concerns about how do we address the growing infrastructure and concerns that we do have. And blending possibly the concerns that we have across the board when it comes to fire and EMS. So I look forward to better understanding how we're going to continue to grow and innovate as we move forward. But I am supportive.
All right, any other comments, Sarah? Do you have the direction you need? Okay. All right, there's no other questions and comments. Thank you very much. Appreciate all the information. Thanks for the presentation and discussion. We'll adjourn until our 5:30 business meeting.